Welcome to TV SchmeeVee.
So we're gonna just jump right in and call it what it is this time.
We gotta call it like we see it.
It may seem to be Movie Schmovie episode 86, but it's actually TV SchmeeVee episode
Fooled you.
2.
Yeah, for those of you that like listen for a moment, like, oh, I downloaded the wrong podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, Ronald just pulled a fast one on you.
Yep. You have not shit the bed. You're actually listening to a special edition of Movie Schmovie, in which we will be highlighting.
You don't know for sure that they haven't shit the bed, Ronald.
You're assuming
Yeah.
that no one is listening to this in bed, right on the verge of having to get up and go to the bathroom.
That's
Yeah.
very true.
And they decided to instead listen to this.
And not actually have shit the bed. Maybe they did shit the bed.
It could be somebody who's had a little ricin.
Yes.
It could be somebody, if you watch Boardwalk Empire, who's had a little too much milk of magnesia. There's all kind of ways that you might shit the bed. And that's a wonderful and not at all disgusting way to start off this family-friendly episode of Movie Schmovie / TV SchmeeVee. So why TV SchmeeVee Part 2, Steve? What made us think, let's do another one of those where we don't talk about movies at all?
At all.
We won't even
Complete
compare.
lack of film
We won't
in
even
this
compare
episode.
any of these TV shows to movies. But why did we do TV SchmeeVee 2, Steve?
Well, at the great suggestion of Sir Jonathan Walker.
Oh, well.
You know,
It's not really
you were
Jonathan.
you were knighted over the past 2 weeks
I'll
since
accept
we've been
Jonathan,
gone.
even though that's not real.
It's the end of an era for a show that among us and among a lot of our friends and colleagues and basically anybody that you talk to TV about, it's probably one of the best shows of recent memory of my personal choices.
Yeah.
Critically, like even commercially for the network that it's on. And you couldn't just let this show go without kind of, or at least we couldn't without giving it a little
Right.
tip of the pork pie maybe.
Well, I mean, I do think we come in here week after week, and we tip of the pork pie sounds kind of
like that?
dirty, but I think we come in here every week, like when a show like Breaking Bad is on. It's I won't say it's all I think about, but I will say that I spend a lot of time during the week, like anticipating the next episode and seeing what that next chapter is going to be. And so week to week, you knew there were a lot of people watching it as soon as they could and that wanted to talk about it right away. So yeah, it feels
Absolutely.
like an event the way that a movie feels like an event.
And I'd say what you just mentioned was actually pretty accurate. I mean, for any season that this series was on, I feel like almost every week you were looking forward to seeing the next episode. And that when we talk about movies that we see week to week, you know, the anticipation really is a lot more sporadic for films. And in sadly, more cases than not for me, you almost feel let down by a lot of those movies that we look forward to, where I think with a series like Breaking Bad, even from the pilot on, it never really, I can't recall watching an episode and feel like it was a wasted episode or a waste of my anticipation or anything, because everything was so deliberate and diligent in setting up everything in that show. And, you know, that's what we're going to be talking about. And it's just exciting to kind of put a cap on it.
I think it's very interesting that the whole idea of having TV shows be the focal point of entertainment in a household, besides like sitcoms and stuff like that, is very strange. And to make episodes episodic is a very new concept.
You mean the shows that have like serialized stories? Yeah, because it is true that most shows, and I will say that sometimes it's almost unfair to a show that just wants to have like a case of the week type approach. You might have a great show that works on that level, but I think audiences right now are almost resistant to that idea of a show that has a status quo and a formula, and each week you know what it's going to be, and it kind of resolves within an hour. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of shows like that have ratings, but I don't watch them, and I don't hear people talking about those shows very much. Most of the shows people seem to talk about are the ones that do start off with an idea, and 6, 7, 8 episodes later, they're just twisting the screws.
I feel like soap operas are the only ones.
I think both of you guys watched Dexter. Is that not right?
Yeah, we did.
So a lot of people seemed really disappointed in the end.
We're
of
not
Dexter.
making eye contact right now.
No, you're not. You guys can't look at each other.
Right.
Some shows you watch out of a sense of duty. Mm-hmm. Was that the case for you in Dexter?
It became like that for the last 2 seasons.
Not really.
Yeah, I would actually argue any season past the 4th season,
Okay.
which is the Trinity season. And
Trinity Killer season was really good.
Yeah. I don't know.
Was
I
that
don't
the John
think
Lithgow season?
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people seem to like that one.
Yeah, I mean, my take on the whole thing is that I think that one of the lead showrunners parted ways with the series after that season, and I just feel like with the way the series progressed from that point, kind of was a downhill experience for me. I almost found myself, like, everybody's asking me about Dexter now, like friends of mine that know I watched it, and that haven't watched it, and I almost am saying to them, imagine this is a 4-season series, and it will be amazing to you.
Right.
You know, watch it and end it on Trinity the way that season ends. If this series ends like that, incredible ending to a series, I would say. But the way that they kind of bled it out and just kind of
what you did there.
yeah, you like that, John?
You know, it was very good.
And it just felt very saturated, very diluted, and all these characters got introduced at the end of this season, or this whole season rather, that really had no play in my experience as a viewer, and also just in how the series ended. The last episode, I mean, there's no real sacrifice made. I mean, there is a sacrifice made. I don't want to really spoil the finale, but the ultimate sacrifice of the series was not made, which I felt like there was no way to not do, and they managed to not do it, and it just completely shit all over the ending for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that people think that there's a common misconception about terrible people in life, and that is that they die. They die early.
I don't think that's a misconception.
Or die,
most people.
or
No,
die.
I know what you're saying, though, Ronald.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
There's a weird thing that people have, this Americanized sort of thing where they're like, this person has to die right now.
It's like people get it into their heads that the most interesting expression of what you can do to a character is to kill them.
Yeah.
As though that's the most powerful thing you can do to a character. And I think that oftentimes that is a way of resolving dramatic tension that can be kind of cheap.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of, like, I remember David Chase, when people were watching The Sopranos to see who got whacked, he said that he was aware of that, and he was basically wanted to tell people, we didn't create these characters and develop them over season after season just to kill them all one by one.
It's
that, like, when someone dies, it's going to be meaningful and it's going to be a plot or a story we want to tell. It doesn't have to be that, when's this person going to die, and that's like the only way it can go. And it seems like at the end of all these shows, isn't that what people talk about? Well, but they at least ask, what's it going to be? Is it going to be prison? Is it going to be death? Is it going to be something else?
And that's not what always happens.
Yeah.
Some people live to be very old and terrible. Now, my issue is that I'm not going to give away every part of the ending, but one of the things is that if you're going to choose the route of survival and isolation, that has to be conveyed well enough that it's good. You know what I mean? If it's done well enough, you'll feel it. That I've seen shows and movies that it's ended in the person not necessarily dying, but being isolated by their terribleness and it affecting them enough that you feel it at the end of the show. And this didn't feel like it.
Okay, good. I thought you were going that way. I was like, no.
Parts of it felt like it.
Okay, well, I would say...
there was a scene that felt like it, but not the end.
We're going to get a little spoilery, right? Tonight? I mean...
Yeah, we may as well. Breaking Bad may have been, and I've heard this said a million times, may have been one of the only shows where a character starts at season 1 and is not the same in season 5 at all, in any way, shape, or form. You see pieces of that person that this person used to be, but the character is different. The issue with Dexter is that they forced that change in one season.
Yep.
It almost made it seem like, it was almost like they were like, it's weird to me that these discoveries are being made about TV shows. A character can change, right? This is a new concept, apparently. And when people saw Breaking Bad, they were like, okay, so Dexter can change too. But we don't have enough time to finish a well-developed sort of change. We're going to rush it in this one season. He's going to be drastically different than he was last season and every season before that. But these changes had to be gradual in order for them to be reasonable. So here's why changing writers can be such a dangerous thing. It's almost like if Stan Lee, right? Stan Lee created Spider-Man, right?
There's some debate. But I know what you're saying. Let's give it a clean argument.
Right,
yeah,
clean argument.
Let's pretend the artist had nothing to do with it.
He may or may not have created this character, right? There are basic ideas about this character, right? If you were to look at this character from an outsider's point of view, you would only see maybe a couple things that define this character, right? The problem with that is having somebody else who doesn't really understand the essence of a character take on the lead as a writer. You miss the things. You miss that he had some depth to him. You miss these things that defined his character, and you just say, oh, he chops people up, he sneaks around,
Spider-Man?
He smiles. You know what I mean? I mean, like, Dexter, you forget these things
Dexter.
about this character. You forget these things about this character, but that's pretty much my opinion about what's happened with certain characters in that show.
So did they have a show creator leave and then a new guy come on or something? Or?
Well,
It wasn't necessarily somebody came on, like one of the executive producers left and the two other ones basically took over, or it was just their show really.
What is a note? Was it like a noticeable dip at that point?
In my opinion, it was. I don't think it felt like immediately when season 5 started. You're like, oh man, something feels weird, because the way season 4 ends, they almost set up the next season at least 6 or 7 episodes for him to deal with how crazy the end of season 4 was.
Yeah.
So it's like they kind of like the season finale of season 4 was so good that it basically it gave an excuse for season 5 to be at least pretty good because of the way it ended, if that makes sense. But then once it got past him dealing with that tragic event, I felt like that's where I noticed it. Like towards the end of the season 5, I just felt like I really wasn't into this show anymore.
Yeah.
And it was just increasingly.
It ended the same way every season.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Was it that it went in areas that you didn't think felt true to what you liked about the show, or did it feel like they kept trying to, despite making all these big changes, they kept trying to essentially have the same show? Because that was the same. I just thought it was strange that 5-6 seasons in, that based on the few things I knew about that show, that he was still seemingly, working with the police and not being caught for doing, and he didn't really get found out by anybody who wasn't like an enemy, right? Or am I wrong about that? Until the end.
I think that because of his way of doing it, he could have survived forever. He could have, but it just wasn't done well enough or convincingly enough towards the end that you felt like.
Mm-hmm.
I could watch certain characters do the same thing forever. This wasn't one of those characters. It wasn't written well enough to be that good. And then the villains started to become like kind of weird. Like they weren't good enough. Like I think that's really what it was. The last,
because they would have like a season-long villain,
exactly,
right?
So, and that's really what changed too after that season, is that it almost became the real struggle became more of like something within Dexter and like within Deb, his sister in the series. Like that's really but I'm saying that's what took over the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you stretch that out after certain events happen over the 4 seasons after Trinity, I just think that it just becomes pretty nonsensical that like it would be able to continue that long, especially because they're both cops, or he's the forensic analysis, whatever, blood splatter. She's a cop, and he's got all these detectives around him, and it's it just becomes. I don't buy it for as long as it went, and especially the way the last 2 seasons went, where the cops' involvement really got really, really close, and nothing ever really caught on. I don't want to say it just didn't seem realistic to me, because that's not my measure stick, but it just felt very stale. Like I wasn't buying that tension anymore.
Don't you think that being realistic? Yeah. I heard this long time ago about this was a quote. Walt Disney supposedly said this about the character designs for movies like Bambi. He said he wanted it to be believable, not realistic. Right, and I think that a lot of times believable, not realistic is what you want from a fictional world. It needs to. Like, we all the time talk about rules. And that's why I was asking about like the creator leaving or the important creative force behind the show leaving. Is because I think sometimes with the show you can tell that if this was a 3 or 4 season thing, maybe they had an arc that would have made sense. But once they get to that point around season 5 or so, usually, where, we're going to add in some characters that kind of remind you of characters that we've killed off, and we're going to try to fill some of these slots, and we're going to try to, we have a bad guy, but, once you get into that point, it's hard to surprise you, especially with a show like something like Dexter, where it being kind of outlandish and over the top is something that's part of the premise from the beginning. Like, how do you keep topping these incredibly gruesome things? Yeah. I just think that at some point, if you don't have story left to tell, it starts to seem like treading water. And not having watched the show, I know
that's it for me.
I know that in the first season, the only thing that bugged me was it didn't seem I felt like I was spoiled by some of these other prestige shows, but it just seemed like there was something kind of it was overlit, or some of the supporting characters weren't as well acted, or something as I was used to on some of these other shows. So it just never quite got its hooks into me. But I thought, the premise is interesting enough to make me see why a lot of Dexter fans almost think that Hannibal, which we've talked about, is almost like fitting into that Dexter slot. But I was sucked into Hannibal from the first frame, whereas Dexter always felt a little like USA Network to me or something.
It is.
Hannibal's a lot more like...
I mean, I'm not really trying to compare 2 totally different shows in a way, but I think people are prone to say, "Oh, this reminds me of that."
I would say that.
It's a lot more like high art. Like, I don't know. I feel like they're going for something different. When I watched, I was like, okay, this is going for something different. Dexter is a little more like gritty. in that way. Like,
yeah, but see, to me, there's that shot in the opening sequence where he's walking out of his apartment and he looks at the camera and he's got this smarmy grin on his face. And to me, that like I can't get behind Michael C. Hall's performance because I feel like it's full of those little kind of moments. I just never bought Dexter as a character.
My friend loves his like narration voice because he thinks he sounds like really uninspired and bored.
I always think it seems like he's describing something that I can tell from what I'm watching what's happening, and I always find that annoying when narration is like describing. So one day when I was walking up to my house, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, obviously, a lot of people really hung in there with this show, and even though I never heard anyone in recent years really loving it, it did seem like the overall effect was this was not a show that stuck the landing. Like, I think, don't you think a great finale could have made people feel a little bit better about this show? But it almost seems like they got to the end and they didn't have a conclusion.
I don't think it could have. I don't think that could have been a good ending for
it. I would have admired the appreciation to end it like that. It had that, and I mean, for people like us that like stuck around, admittedly, after really kind of being done with the show after season 5, because I just felt like I'm more than halfway and I need to stick with this show.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's on me, but I just felt like it didn't really finish it for me. And I was reading in an article, and I suggest you guys find this I don't want to go over everything, but the producer that left is Clyde Phillips, and they interviewed him the day after the series finale aired. And they were saying that basically he had his plan, the way to end the series, whether it was in 8 seasons or not, was basically that the entire show would be, you would come to find in the last shot that the entire show was basically Dexter's life flashing before his eyes before he dies on death row for being caught for his crimes. Mm-hmm. Which, in his explanation of it, it's incredibly inspiring to me, and like it sounds like it would have been incredible to see that shot and just to be completely mind blown about what I just invested however many seasons in. And in researching it, it's based on an old short story called "An Occurrence at Owl Creek," the Owl Creek Bridge. Yeah, that idea. You've heard of it?
The Ambrose Bierce story.
Yeah. Like about how basically a soldier was hung and, he thinks he has this experience.
Like there's this whole moment, it's all about him like escaping being hung on this bridge.
Right.
And then it keeps coming, I mean, I guess to totally spoil this classic story.
No.
But it comes back around to him dying and being hung. But in the moment before he dies, he sort of fantasizes this great escape.
And how sensational it was, and that's kind of what this guy was saying. That's what he wanted
I think it was actually made into like a Twilight Zone episode or an episode of one of those shows.
I actually found like a version of it that I want to actually read the whole thing after reading that.
Oh, it's great.
But that kind of like out there, like just fuck it all, like that kind of ending for a show like this, I feel like that's what I wanted. And the way this ended, just especially the last shot, the last 36 seconds or whatever it is of the show.
I didn't hate it.
I fucking am so mad that it ended like that.
Well, I heard someone suggest, and again, this is just what I know from what I've read, is that someone said that they suggest replacing the phrase "jump the shark" with "became a lumberjack."
That's it. I would second that.
Jumping the shark is kind of an overused concept, but we can still feel that like that dip in quality, or that things were interesting up until event X happened.
It wasn't.
So you didn't hate it?
I didn't hate it. I hated it, but it could have been. I can't side with the
some
whole
conflict. Ronald didn't hate it. Steve hated it.
I can't side with their whole like hate. I mean, I didn't even.
Let's have a cage match.
I didn't hate the Sopranos ending. I think
neither did I.
No, I didn't.
Hated that. Like people were like,
I know it was
up in
arms. A lot of
people
did.
That,
I kind of feel like it's a litmus test for whether you are dumb or not. If you hated the end of the Sopranos, you're dumb.
Yeah, that's the one thing that
like
was,
it is. It's like you can have a debate about whether it was the ending in. You know what I'm saying? Like the people who just absolutely hated that ending were people who expected something that show wasn't for a long time and hadn't been promising for a long. Maybe in the first 3 seasons that show was really like about the mob,
right,
and about the plot oriented stuff. But once it went on, you could tell it was much more about how people don't change and people are stuck in these ruts, and so it's much more about the characters.
Yeah.
And I thought that ending, even though I wouldn't have planned that ending, I wasn't expecting that. I still immediately sort of accepted it as the ambiguity of it was the point of it in a way, Yeah. Even though, what do you think? Well, I mean, let's talk about that. What do you think? Do you think Tony Soprano's dead, or do you think he's alive?
I think it really has to do with everything that he did up until that point and the paranoia that it brings about. Like that every moment where a door opens is going to be like that moment for him for the rest of his life.
You were experiencing what every moment of Tony Soprano's life was.
Right. It was incredible the way it was done. Everybody was like, what was that? I'm like, that is how it must feel like that to have murdered that many people, to have done so much dirt, to have cheated so many times. You never know. It could be a girl that he had sex with before.
Yeah.
It could be a person. It could be the Russian that disappeared in the snow.
It could even be.
It could have been.
It could even be his daughter getting hit by a car by a completely fluke, nothing related to the life of crime. You know, like the scene with her. They actually make her like parallel parking suspenseful because you're watching this moment and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
No, I thought that was, and in that sense, it's like brilliant. You know,
it is brilliant. It's something that people really don't talk about in terms of glamorizing this lifestyle. Mm-hmm. It's always like the death, people getting shot up and all that stuff. It's never the extreme paranoia that comes about after you've done all these horrific things to people.
And back to what we've said before, in a way, that living hell is worse than if he just got gunned down. I mean, let's not, rest in peace, James Gandolfini, but it was always sort of like Tony always seemed like a guy who might not last that long anyway. I mean, Tony could have dropped dead of a heart attack.
Yeah.
I mean,
on top of everything else.
Right, on top of everything else. So like you do picture, just it's not fun to be Tony Soprano. At its best, it's a stressful existence. And what we saw all along was kind of why he is the way he is and how he's not going to change from being that fundamental person.
Yeah.
But no, I thought, because I was talking to someone just last week who was like, when we got on that subject, she said, "Oh, you think Tony's alive? He's clearly dead." And she asked someone else, "Is he dead or alive?" And they were like, "Oh, dead as a doornail." And I was like, "No." But you know what? I would say even beyond the fact that I agree with you, and you seem to agree with us, Steve.
Definitely.
You're over there. Steve's doing a research paper or something while we're recording this episode. But I think that the fact that they left it ambiguous means that it doesn't, not to double back on what we just said, but it doesn't mean that he's not dead.
Yeah.
It just means he doesn't have to be dead. Like, that ending doesn't mean anything in the sense of confirming that he's dead. There are ample opportunities for this guy to get killed, even if it's not true and he only sees it that way. That scene was all about stepping into his perspective.
Yeah. I think that's just human nature to want those things to happen to people. But one of the beautiful things that I've seen also shown in movies is kind of the idea, and it's kind of sad. I mean, well, it is extremely sad. The whole idea that even when this person dies, if they die, it doesn't ease the pain. It doesn't make you feel any better that this person has created this much havoc and destruction and pain. It really doesn't help that much. So this idea is very, very far-fetched to me. Like, oh, this will solve it all if this person dies at the end. I don't know.
Well, it's you got, back to what you were saying about there being maybe this kind of American bloodlust or this kind of, if it's not strictly American, but like, people watch this type of entertainment to see someone pay for their crimes. And it's like, that's not necessarily what I clock in for in those types of shows. But it is a huge thing now. All these shows are based around anti-heroes. They're all based around people who would have been villains or could easily be villains in another show. And as you were saying about Walter White, a character who does become the villain of his own show.
Yeah.
In a sense.
So, what do you think about since we're talking about it, the evolution of Walter White?
Well, I will say one thing. I'll agree with you that it's remarkable how the show managed to start off with this premise, and you probably have heard it quoted all over the place for years now, from Mr. Chips to Scarface.
Yeah.
Meaning from, milquetoast teacher to drug lord and maniacal, and a guy whose ego maybe destroys everything around him. That was the arc that became almost like a cliche to say that about the show. And I think that is exactly what they did, Ronald. Like you said, it was amazing how gradual they took that transformation. But I will add to that the idea that, especially in the last stretch, they made it apparent that we're also supposed to wonder, was he really a nice man before? Was he maybe always this bitter, petty person who, having the cancer, gave him a reason to unleash all this, as you were saying before, all this havoc that definitely became a question as the show went on. Like, if he didn't have the cancer, would he get out of this life? And we saw again and again that there was more to it for him than providing for his family or for, thinking of the day when he might be gone. It definitely satisfied some hunger for recognition and power that was in this man, even when he was kind of a henpecked high school teacher.
Yeah. What's weird too? Like, the ending brought some clarity about some of the characters. Yeah. For example, Skylar, right? I didn't really like Skylar for a very long time, but then after the series finale, I realized that maybe all she really wanted was honesty.
I guess at this point,
on top of everything,
this point, anyone who's listening to this conversation and doesn't expect us to get into some spoilers about what happens in Breaking Bad, we'll go ahead and tell you what we're doing here, folks. If you were listening to this podcast to decide whether to watch this little show, Breaking Bad, that you've heard about, I think, yes, go watch all of them and then come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. Because we're not just going to talk about the finale, but we're also going to talk about our favorite moments from the show, which are going to necessarily not just spoil the end, but probably the best, moment. So if you are a fan of the show and you've kept up with it, and you just want to, have a little bit more of a celebration of it before we never speak of it again.
Right.
Because that's how fast pop culture moves right now. So at the end of the show, there's a very pivotal moment. Maybe we shouldn't talk too much about a scene that could be on someone's list. Mm-hmm. But I will say that, yes, at the end of the show, they left Skyler. They kind of rehabilitated that character in a lot of ways in this last season, I thought. Because I think for a lot of fans, she became... I think a lot of people got caught up in the idea that Walter White is cool and anyone who stands in his way is a villain. And I think as the show twisted the morality of how we feel about Walter, a lot of fans didn't keep up with that and still hated anybody who got in Walter's way. I was seeing as recently as a couple of weeks ago people saying, Walt Jr.'s got to die. He called the cops on his dad. And I was like, no, the show is not that type of show. They're not going to kill Walt Jr. for that reason. Yeah. And if they do kill Walt Jr., it won't be because he had it coming. It'll be a tragedy.
Yeah.
But I think so many people still wanted that bloodlust and were like in the bag for Walt. I never felt like I was either or. I always felt like you could watch the show and kind of... Oh, my goodness. There's a call here on the hotline.
It's from Cleveland, Ohio.
Call from Cleveland, OH.
This has never happened before. This is kind of embarrassing.
Call from Cleveland, OH.
That can't be the first time you said that, John.
No, but I think the show doesn't require you to be like, I'm a fan of Walter White and therefore I hate everyone who stands against him, nor does it require you to be... Well, I want to see that guy go down. The fact that Skyler's not like an easily likable character just means that the writers of the show are smart and aren't going to create a boring character who's like, a Pollyanna type. Like Skyler was definitely morally questionable at different points in the show.
Yeah, in her life, I think she did what she had to do, and she did some bad things like the cheating and all that stuff, but. I think what was really cool was everybody did their version of what they thought was survival.
Yeah.
And it didn't always work out for everybody, especially when it came to making decisions, withholding information to make situations better. Like the worst character ever written, I hate his face, rest in peace. He was buried in the desert. Bastard.
I can't believe he hates.
I hate him. Well, I'm not even gonna say his name. I dislike him.
I can't believe he hates Hank.
I hate.
Oh,
him.
Really?
Yeah, man.
Wow.
Hank is one of the best written characters, but I hate his face, man. Like I didn't
like his physical face.
No, I don't know. Like it was one thing for him to be
so insulting,
super duper steadfast in his whole thing to get Walt. That I understood that, but it was the things that he did towards the end that really made me feel like he deserved, like when the way he treated Jesse towards the end.
Yeah, but why would he not think of Jesse that way? Jesse's a murderer and a drug dealer. Like what has he ever seen of Jesse to make him respect him or think that he was? I'm agreeing with you as far as that moment sent a chill down my spine. But that doesn't make me think Hank's a bad guy. It just means they're like you said before. Everybody's got their own attitude about what's going on. I mean, it's like on paper, Jesse Pinkman is a reprobate. We just happen to know that he's got a heart and that he's trying, that he wants something better.
Right. I guess the issue is sometimes you see cop shows where a cop kind of tries to understand where people come from. Like, sometimes you watch The Wire and they'll explain, like, this person was this. He was poor. He grew up here. Do you blame him for being in a situation? And then you have cops that are like, he is a criminal. He touched drugs. Yeah. He's evil. He must go to jail forever and ever and ever. And Hank is one of those types. Maybe I know why. I know why I dislike him. Because I've met several police officers that struck me as Hank types. They were super aggressive towards me. That's what it is. Well, I have a personal.
Yeah, it sounds
very personal, but I mean, it's like
But it's that mentality that really bothers me.
See, it's like I'm not disagreeing with anything you say about Hank, but it doesn't make me dislike the character, and it didn't make me think that. It's kind of like the way when so many people hated Skylar because she cheated on Walt, and as though Walt hasn't murdered people. It's like they were more mad that she was an adulteress than that Walt was a murderer. I feel like with Hank, people are so in love with Walt that they don't want to realize that in the terms of what Hank's been exposed to, in terms of what his job was, that, I mean, the show became as much about his kind of, how he kept getting put in jeopardy.
Yeah.
You know, and by the time he finds out that Walt is the person he's been tracking all along, I think that he became blinded by rage. And when he said that about Jesse, about not caring if he got killed, I think that's the specific moment you're talking about.
Yeah.
It definitely felt like, ooh, boy, Hank's gone dark. But I mean, as far as what he knew, there was no reason for Hank or for Steve Gomez to think like, this Jesse Pinkman seems like a good kid. I mean, they didn't have any reason to think it, but I do think that if we're going to look at how the show played that out, it was really brilliant that they gave us the resolution. I mean, there's essentially that scene in the desert, which we should probably start talking about some of our favorite moments because we might be getting to somebody's picks.
Yeah, maybe we should.
But like, there's that scene in the desert that is basically the resolution of the show we had been watching, and then after that, it was almost like epilogue for 2 or 3 episodes. And I thought it was sort of, when you look back, a lot of people were saying that they didn't feel surprised by the final episode, but I feel like the last episode was almost the denouement. It was all the pieces falling into place and seeing how it ends. The real climax of the show is when Hank and Gomez and Jesse outsmart Walt out in the desert. Like, that scene was the real, like, you wondered what would happen. You know, the cuffs go on kind of moment. After that, it was all about, like, what happens after that. So I think that it's really interesting that they gave us the climax that we might have expected.
Yeah.
And then said, no, you know, Walt made this call. These guys are coming. But this scene, which would go one way and was about to go one way, won't. And we'll never, like, it, you know what I'm saying? Like, another show might have ended with Walt being carried off in that moment. But because we know he doesn't stay in custody because we've seen this flash forward. Yeah. It's like, I thought that was so exciting for them to, like, basically resolve the plot that I thought was going to go to the end of the show. And then there's still 3 episodes left. I thought that was brilliant.
If it would have ended on that note, it would have been cool to me. But I think that Hank, this proves to me that Jesse is still smarter than Hank. Because he would never have concocted such a crazy scheme to get Walt there.
All Jesse said was his money, though. Everything else was Hank's idea.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Hank was the one who figured out about the rental car.
Getting him there getting him there. Actually baiting him there.
Well, that was brilliant. I'm not saying Jesse. Brilliant. I think but it was the fact that they collaborated. I think that what we can say is that it takes 3 guys to outsmart Walt.
Outsmart one person. Yeah.
But so let's get into some of those picks. We're going to talk a little bit about favorite moments. Ronald, you want to?
Believe it or not, one of my favorite moments is actually in a whole episode that had nothing to do with any action, anything. Is widely seen as one of the most hated episodes ever, and that's A Fly. That episode.
Really? People hate that one?
A lot of people hate that episode. It's actually considered like a sore thumb, like the worst. People consider it like the worst episode.
You're talking about, what's the name? Is it named?
I think it actually is called A Fly.
Yeah, or Fly.
Or The Fly, yeah. A Fly. But the reason
or Bug?
why,
was it called Bug?
I think it was called A Fly. Oh, but the reason...
why do you love it, Ronald?
Yeah.
Well, the reason
why do you love this entire episode that qualifies as a moment?
The reason why it's so amazing to me is because it took an approach to the show in the middle of everything going crazy. They didn't know if their lives were in danger at that point. Things just were crazy. They were trapped in this basement cooking. And you had this moment, this hour moment, where these characters were being further defined through their interactions. Just how methodical Walt is and how crazy Jesse is, and Walt wanting to tell Jesse about his girlfriend and kind of telling him other things he wanted to, but he couldn't. Mm-hmm. The conflict that exists between them was defined in that episode to me. And it was almost like poetry. It was almost like poetry because it was done in one room.
There's a name for that. Have you ever heard of bottle episodes?
Yeah.
And so they usually do it as like a budgetary thing on a like a lot of times sitcoms would do it. A cheap episode would be one where they only use one set, or even on, sitcoms do that a lot, but I mean on any show where they say we're going to set it in one place, which doesn't mean, not so many locations. Usually it's a confined number of characters. Yeah. So they call them bottle episodes. I think that they did it in a very self-conscious way. in the sense that I don't think Breaking Bad necessarily had to do it as a budgetary thing.
Right.
But that's like a backdoor advantage of that type of show, is that you can go into this one location and shoot the hell out of that one location.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. It's like one of the few times that the show slowed down that much to show you just a couple of characters interacting. And how interesting is it that in that episode you almost get the confession that comes in such a different way later on.
Oh, it did. Oh, yes, it did. Wow, like, yeah. Okay, yeah, that was mine.
Yeah.
It was such a good episode.
What season was that one in? I can't remember. Was
3.
that season 3?
It is called The Fly.
It's called The Fly, yeah.
Is that the one?
Season 3, episode 10.
Good episode.
And essentially, that's when they're pretty well under Gus's thumb at that point.
Yeah, yes.
It's interesting how long the show spent watching those two characters struggle with the power, the balance of power between them and Gus and everything, and everything they had to do to stay alive. I mean, you know, it's interesting how our picture of Walt is Heisenberg, kind of triumphant. But really, that wasn't until the end of season 4 that version of the character emerged. It's really only season 5, which has been the period where Walt is this mastermind whose plans seem to keep working. You know, so you're right. That was at a point where he seemed really desperate, and there was, you know, he didn't have a whole storage facility full of money. He just had like a lot of laundry bags full of money.
Yeah, and Walt was a blundering idiot for most of the seasons. Like, he was scared out of his mind and reacting in real time to these sorts of things. It just so happens. So I can kind of relate to being around a person like this, because this is really weird. My dad is like a science major. And one of the things that I noticed about him is he's a very bottom line person. Mm-hmm. He's a very logic-based person. And I noticed through Walt's character, when I meet people like that, they're very bottom line. It's like logic. Logic defines things, and this is it. Like, this is my logic. This is how it's going to work. Mm-hmm. This will make it easier. That's it.
Quick question about your dad. How pure is the meth that he makes?
Probably pretty pure.
Pretty pure? All right.
I'd say 90%.
Oh, 90%? Okay, so good.
It's blue.
Yeah.
It's blue at that point.
Right. Better than a bunch of Aryans can figure out, but not quite as good as like a Pinkman level.
Right.
All right.
Right. So it's just something that's really interesting about, and that's something that they really don't focus on, but it really is a huge part of his personality, that science background. That sort of like logic based thing, like the thing that made him amazing, that made the explosion that he did in the house that one. It's that thing that defines him. Mm-hmm. It's also the thing that kind of makes him so crazy when it comes to his decision making skills. So
well, in that episode too, it's like madness. I mean, like, it's a little bit. I mean, it might be true that they need to get rid of this fly, but it also seems a little bit like he's gone off the deep end. That really maybe they could just get on with it, but it's become like an obsession.
Right.
And don't you think maybe is it all about Walt trying to assess control over something at that point? You know, like the fact that he feels like he's being manipulated and he doesn't see a way out. Like, this is the one thing he can control. Maybe is this laboratory, but that's a good choice. Me next?
Yeah,
Steve just gave me the finger, and I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, he gave me the. Actually, it would be slick if I'd allowed that to be a silent cue, and I just said, "Well, my first pick." Well, my first pick. I guess I'll go in chronological order as these go through the show. My first pick comes in the 8th episode of the 2nd season. It's an episode called Better Call Saul. And you can imagine which great character gets introduced in that episode. There's a great line before they go to meet him where Jesse tells Walt, "You don't need a criminal lawyer. You need a criminal lawyer." You know?
Yeah.
And I've heard the creators of the show say that they conceived Saul as a lawyer who's never been in court. That his clients are all so shady that his mission would be to keep them out of court, to cut deals, work the system, keep them out of court, because none of these clients would stand a chance in court. So that's why they go to see him. It's earlier in the episode where he kind of rejects them, and it's a funny bit of... It's a little subtle because Walt breaks down into a coughing fit when he first meets Saul. But they later show up, and they show up in their little toboggans with the tassels on them that Jesse bought. So they're out there in the desert, and they've got Saul, and they've taken him out to basically where they've dug a grave, and they've got him on his knees, and they've got guns at his back. And he's very nervous. But in that scene, it's maybe about a 5-minute scene, Saul goes from them trying to intimidate him into basically making sure that Badger's okay, to him basically getting them to hire him as their lawyer because he recognizes them. He hears Walt cough, and he says, "Mr. Mayhew." Well, basically, when they go to him earlier, Walt's pretending to be Badger's uncle, and he says his name is Mr. Mayhew. And so when Saul hears Walt cough, he says, "Mr. Mayhew," and at that point, he gets him to take the mask off. He says, "If you're coughing, just take it off. You can breathe better." He just basically takes control of the situation from being on his knees out in the desert and being really scared. He recognizes what's going on. So it's one of those, you were talking about Walt being kind of a blunderer. It's one of those scenes where you really see he's not good at this criminal thing yet. And Saul kind of convinces him, not only are you shouldn't kill me, but this isn't the way we go about things. You're going to need a lawyer. So he gets them to give him $1 so that anything they say at that point is protected by attorney-client privilege. And then from that moment on, Saul is the character that he becomes in the show. I mean, if you look back, Saul's always sort of given good advice. Yeah. Even if sometimes the advice has been to kill a character that we like. But I think in that moment, I was so impressed with not just how the character turned that scene around and took this moment where he was about to be killed to a moment where he's not only alive but hired, but the fact that Bob Odenkirk convinced me in that scene of, oh, this guy, he may be a little sketchy and his acting may be a little bit comedic, a few degrees more funny than the rest of the show. I bought him in that world, and I bought that he could take control and actually have a spot in this cutthroat world. And I think you never really forget that Saul is not really one of these cutthroat guys. I mean, after that moment, you always kind of fear for Saul that, and there's definitely a few points where he gets beaten up or bad things happen, but I think they always show he's like a cockroach. He did seem like a character that would make it out alive. Yeah. And if, as it turns out at the end of the show, he does sort of seem to get out of Dodge in time. So I thought that was a great introduction to a great character.
Yeah, I think that the cool part about Saul and the comedic whole thing is something that you see all the time is, all right, so one of the things about funny people, and not every funny person, is not necessarily that some of the funniest people are the saddest people because they deal with so much stuff, like just human interaction and stuff like that. But it's almost like when you're sharp like that, it's like everything's coming at you in slow motion. Mm-hmm. So there is something kind of funny about that. Yeah. Kind of pointing at something, and I talk about the absurdity of that. Seeing people get into these dumb situations all the time. He's almost that voice that we all have as we're reacting to everything else. Like, why don't you do that?
Well, we find out later his name's not Goodman, it's McGill. We also see I don't know if it's always visible, but his diploma that hangs behind him is from the University of American Samoa, which may not be a real school at all.
Whatever happened to Hugh?
Right, he was sitting in that room.
Did he just not come out of that room?
I expected him to come back to him
Steve
at some
told
point.
him never to leave the room.
Yeah.
So poor Hero's still sitting in there.
I did picture them like cutting to him with like a beard and a bunch of Chinese food cartons scattered around or something like that. But
yeah, I liked his character a lot.
Yeah,
another comedian that is a great actor in that show.
Kubi is played by Bill Burr, who's also a great comedian. I think they did well on that show and a lot of shows seem to, movies and shows where they just pick comedians to play maybe non-comic characters, but usually comedians are pretty good actors.
Yeah. That was a cool
Steve.
moment.
So my first pick, I think is the same season that you just picked from, John. Is I'm gonna pull a pseudo Walker right now. Only because the episode ends and the scene kind of picks up in the next episode.
Okay.
So this is the end of episode 12 and the beginning of 13 of season 2, and this is basically the scene where Walt basically lets Jane die. And I think, and then the beginning of episode 13 is Jesse realizing it and seeing its effect on him, basically.
Oh man, the dread that you feel knowing what that's going to do to him, because he's really hanging at a thread at that point.
At that point, yeah, and the whole build up to that is that she finds out about Walt withholding this money because Walt's basically said to Jesse, "You have to prove to me that you're clean before you get your cut of this first delivery that they make to Gus." And she learns about it, and she basically is trying to expose this whole thing to Jesse, so that he can get his cut. But it's really the first scene that you really kind of see. I guess I don't know. I guess the moment that I felt like Walt really lost himself and lost his soul in terms of what he would do to affect another person, and then him realizing that in Jesse in the next episode, and the way that Jesse was just burying himself in drugs and just like basically went on 10 times worse than what Walt was trying to get him away from in the episode prior. So his actions in trying to, Walt actually goes to that house to basically make amends with Jesse and to settle something, to make a good gesture. And as he's trying to wake Jesse up, he knocks her over and just watches her choke on her own. I don't know, I guess vomit, and just watches her die. I mean, it's a hard scene to watch.
It was hard to watch, and Steve, I think you hit on one of the crucial things that almost like he didn't just let her die.
Right.
He's the cause of it.
Absolutely. And it's definitely one of the more devastating scenes of the whole series for me.
And maybe a point of no return for Walt. Like that might have been. Is that maybe the first real point of no return for Walt? I mean, I know we've seen him kill people, but they've always been in the drug trade. Was that the first time that you thought, oh man, there's no bouncing back from this? You know?
And not only that, but like that moment really goes on and continues through the end of the series. Up until the very last moment, you know that the decisions that Jesse is motivated by and makes have to do with that moment. You know, and initially him thinking that he's the cause of it and Walt never disclosing that. And then, you know, in the third to last episode or second to last episode, when he tells him, it's just a moment that looms through the rest of the seasons. And you know, you see her in a couple of flashbacks in the later seasons, but just a moment where Jesse kind of, and not only that, but I think it's where Walt realizes that there's a lot more to Jesse than just this former student who's a dropout who he's happening to work with now. He sees how much it affects him and how crushed he is by it. And I think it almost becomes a point where you really just see a whole different Walter White, like in deciding, like you just said, to not do anything on something that you accidentally did. And
you see him weighing it, and you see him think, like, isn't maybe not better for me if this person is dead, point blank, and that is
which
brutal.
is a shitty thing to think.
Right, because in his mind, in doing that, he's improving his situation, and he still thinks that Jane is the cause of why Jesse's back in the drugs, and in some, you know, she was, but he sees it in that moment at click. You're thinking, oh, this is a way that my life's going to be better and Jesse's life's going to be better. But in reality, he sent him off the deep end. And that realization in the episode that follows it, just right off of that scene, it just is a crazy experience for a TV show. And I don't know that...
He was never the same after that.
At all, yeah. I mean, he was a broken person because of that. Especially because up until the moment that Walt tells him the truth, he thinks he's the reason she died.
Yeah.
And that's a crazy burden to carry.
Okay, so now let's talk about that moment in the 6th episode of this season, which was Ozymandias, which may have been one of the best episodes that the show ever did, where he basically just says, he just is saying it just to be mean. And it's at that moment, he believes Jesse's about to be taken off by these Aryans and tortured for information and then killed. And he wants to stick the knife in. Because at that point, he blames Jesse for Hank being dead.
Yeah.
When really it's his phone call that caught, you know, clearly at that point, Walt's not a nice man. But
yeah, there's a lack of acceptance in terms of what he accepts as his own, is his fault.
Yeah, it's weird.
And that really kind of continues.
I mean, even at the end of the show, when he takes out all the Aryans, you feel that he's blaming them for Hank's death.
Totally. Even still, even though he made that call and wanted them to come destroy everything that was in that area.
You know, even though you don't like Hank or never did, Ronald, you had to admire anyone who goes out telling the guy who's got a gun on him to go fuck himself. You have to admire that.
At
least he went out like a man.
And in that moment, he won up Walt. He's like, you're the smartest man I know. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
Like he had his decision before. That line is just money.
You can never say that Hank was a coward in any way, shape, or form. No. He confronted Walt. Right after he knew. He covered. I mean, I feel like.
I love it when someone dies in mid-sentence, when someone's like saying, do what you're going to do, or just go ahead and shoot me. I think Stringer Bell's basically saying, come on, shoot me, before he gets killed. And it's always cut off a little bit. Poetic justice, I believe I believe Uncle Jack was in mid-sentence when Walt got him too. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, mine was if Jesse's girlfriend dying was a defining moment in Jesse's life, I think that one that kind of took the chaos.
Which girlfriend dying?
I know.
Jane.
I know.
Yeah,
Jane.
I was just going.
If that was something that defined Jesse's character, this was one that defined control. It defined the lack of control of the situation, and that was when Todd shot the little kid.
Oh, you bastard!
So this was a defining moment.
You had eyes on my list too.
This is a defining moment because up until that point, all the chaos that was created was a sum of all the things that they had done, right? When they introduced new people, when you introduce people that aren't accustomed to the way you work, aren't accustomed to the way you survive, aren't accustomed to the rules that you have about lives being taken and lives preserved. Things get crazy. And introducing Todd into their situation was the nail in the coffin in a lot of ways.
Yeah, a character who sneaks up in terms of his importance. And that initial moment, he seemed like almost seemed like a character they brought in to be cannon fodder. You would have expected him to be the one to get shot or to get caught and maybe turn witness or something like that.
Right.
Man, he was the cancer that contributed to everything that happened.
Yeah, and everything that's evil and rotten about him is contained in two things he does. One is kill the kid. Other is take the kid's tarantula home with him.
Yeah.
And I think that sets up, like, at that moment, I think everybody was like, this guy's like a sociopath because he killed someone and kind of took a trophy with him, or he's just fascinated. But there's that little bit with him and looking at the spider in the jar.
Absolutely.
He's kind of a slow guy.
Yeah.
Also,
he looks slow, but clear. Well, he develops, right?
It's one thing about that his actions in general that made him seem very like. So that there's one thing for Walt and Jesse to make decisions based on survival, what they defined as survival, and there's another thing for a person to volunteer this sort of chaos through killing a little kid. They could have let that kid go. That kid wouldn't have said anything.
Or they could have said, we're out here doing something for the county or something like that. Yeah, there's any number of things that kid. And the kid may have said, I think, again, obviously the clean way to do it is to kill the kid because that leaves no question.
Yeah.
But they could have... Yes, there's several ways they could have explained away what they were doing.
Right. Easily.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, good.
And it's that sort of mobster sort of thing that Todd had, that Jesse and Walt didn't have, that made this sort of there are people like Walt that deal drugs, and then there are people like Todd and his uncle. You know what I mean? Like they're different sorts of ways of dealing with things. And this, up until that point, that sort of person had never affected them quite as much as it had. Yeah. That's a different element. A person that'll just kill off of impulse, that is a different sort of energy.
And to make that call, like to make that quick gut call and say, like, this is the simplest way to do it. Which, again, in the end, it was simpler. Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, that was a moment. It was interesting that came after that heist with the train, which was maybe one of the kind of more fun, sort of over-the-top
like
capers.
A Western,
yeah, and then for them to, like, follow that up with the biggest gut punch in the world. And then that next episode that started off with them disposing of the body, that was one of the saddest things I've ever seen.
Well, I think that the big moment, I mean, I actually had that on my list as well, Ronald, so it's an awesome pick. The thing that, I think two things from that episode, or that scene. John just said, like, the build-up of how fun and exciting that scene is, the actual heist itself.
Like the clockwork precision
Yes, exactly.
of it.
Like, it just felt so methodical and just fun. It almost felt fun. But it's like, it's just the way that Vince Gilligan always kind of just shocked people with just, like, unexpected death, you know? And I mean, in this case, a child is, like, the ultimate in a show like this in some ways. And I think it continued, and the second thing is that it basically... It marked the point of no return between Walt and Jesse.
Yeah, I agree.
It basically was the point that, from everything that had preceded it, not only at that point did Walt become... It shows how obsessed with the job Walt is, that he sides with Todd. You know, Jesse's had, like, this history with, obviously, a closeness to kids and, you know, children in the show. Jesse's always been, like, relating to them, you know? Yeah. He obviously likes kids. And for it to be that life that Todd takes, and, you know, just to be that moment where he looks to Walt to side with him and he doesn't, that's where it stopped. That moment before that happened is the last time the two of them had a happy moment together in the rest of the series. And that's the moment that it just all stops.
That is such a defining moment. If, like, it's like two things chipped. I mean, like, the death of Jane was one, and then that was it. That was the final moment that they would ever look at each other with some sort of mutual respect, and then it became like, I fucking hate this person.
Yeah.
And that is intense, man. And the fact that it carried on for as long as it did and didn't get old was pretty crazy.
Well, I mean, again, it feels like the show stayed in that kind of ambiguous place for so long, but that was just 10 episodes before the end of the show in its entirety. That was, well into the last season of the show. So it's interesting to note that last chunk of episodes is all about those moments that you can't go back from.
Right.
It's all about these characters were, you see it happen between Skylar and Marie. You see it happen between Walt and Hank. You see it happen between Walt and his family. All these characters, like, there was going to be no more fun. And the show still managed to be very exciting and sometimes very darkly funny and very fun to watch because of how exciting the plot was.
Yeah.
But the fun, the nice moments between the characters got fewer and farther between, for sure. And that definitely was a impossible to feel good about what these people are doing kind of moment, Except for the jerks who still worship Walter White, which is still funny to me. I just feel like, again, if you hate the ending of The Sopranos, you're dumb. If you thought Walter White was the unequivocal hero of this story, you're dumb.
You're right.
Not to say that you have to hate him, but so yeah, my second pick is one that I loved this moment. I won't say it's the first moment when this character really showed what a great character he was, but it's a moment. It's like a 5-minute scene, and this is a character that we had already met. And we'd already kind of seen how efficient he was. And when he gets brought in as a fixer, I believe Mike's first appearance is in the episode, or his first kind of act, isn't it, to maybe clean up after the Jane situation?
I think it's it. I think it might be.
The one thing I did learn from kind of going back and looking at all these old episodes is that the plot on this show was twistier than I remembered. Like, I remember how things kind of shook out.
Yeah.
I don't always remember the machinations that got things into those places. So I actually probably would go back and rewatch the whole show. But I know we'd seen Mike before, but there's a moment in the last episode of season 3 called Full Measure. It's a scene, it's about a 5-minute scene where, and we don't even really know for sure what Mike is doing, but he is going to this chemical company, which appears to have been taken over by some Mexican cartel members as either a message to Gus Fring or checking in on Gus Fring, but I believe it's a chemical supply company where they keep the chemicals that they use for their meth operation. And it's an introduction, I believe, also to Mr. Chow, the old Asian guy that later gets killed as one of Mike's guys. But it's a scene where Mike goes into the place, and it's almost like a scene out of... It's like James Bond meets the coolest hitman meets the coolest action character you've ever seen. Mike just goes in and, without breaking a sweat, dismantles these guys, just like, kills them without even kind of turning his head and looking at him type thing. And then he goes into the place, and, there's that moment where he's about to sneak into a room, and there's a guy standing on the other side of the wall, and Mr. Chow has got his hands up, and he uses the height of his hands to indicate to Mike how to aim his gun through the wall that he can, the other guy that he can see. It's just this great moment. It's like 5 minutes. It starts with him. You see him driving around. He's got some balloons in the back seat of his car, and he's with his granddaughter, which we later find out is an important part of Mike's character, that he loves his granddaughter. And you see her leave, and she's got some of the balloons, and he says, no, those balloons, maybe she thinks the balloons are for her, and he says, no, those are for me, and she says, but you're old, he says, you're never too old for balloons. And the next thing you see him doing is going up to this chemical factory or warehouse, and he releases the balloons into the power lines and causes everything to short out at the place. And then after that, I mean, it's like 5 minutes of just the coolest, most collected dismantling. Like, he kills 4 guys. He also goes up to Chow, and he finds out if there's like a woman, a secretary in the front, and she's cowering, and he basically like finds out if she can drive. Does she have a driver's license? He asks Chow, and he's like, yeah. And then he says, all right, cool. And he shoots Chow in the leg as a warning and says, don't let this happen again. And basically then says, well, all right, get her to drive you to the hospital now. Like, that's why he was checking to see if the woman could drive, was because before he shot the guy, he wanted to make sure that someone could get him to the hospital.
Right.
But it's just a great moment, and I feel like everything that Mike did after that, I kept flashing back to just, you never doubt what an efficient badass he is. Now, Mike does some things that I don't necessarily, his character, he's another character that's kind of, he sets some of the stage for his own ruin. Like, Walt killing him is largely due to some things that Mike has done and said and kind of threatened and challenged Walt. But in that moment, Mike just seems like the most efficient person in the world. And the fact that he's working for this, this ruthless drug lord, you understand why someone like Gus would work with someone like Mike.
Yeah.
Great moment.
I'm going to piggyback on that. My second favorite moment is the episode before that called Half Measures. No Half Measures. And it's actually just a small, quiet scene with Walt and Mike in one of the rooms, and where basically Mike sits Walt down to tell him this story about his, an experience he had when he was a beat cop, I think in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Almost like telling a story to a kid, it felt like. And it's kind of just a really it tells you a lot about Mike beyond knowing how efficient he is as a killer or as a fixer or whatever it is. Yeah. Because you learn so much more about him, like, internally. Like, there's actually a heart, and there's like a lot of story to him to be told, which we do find out later in episodes. But it's also, now that we see the way the series ends following that episode, it also proves to have more. It resonates deeper just because we see that almost, he basically makes the same mistake twice, and that's kind of his end. Like John was just saying, like, some of the decisions he makes before Walt actually takes him out, it almost makes him fall victim to the same moral that he's trying to teach Walt from a mistake he made when he was a cop. Basically never to, like, leave something half done, and he kind of makes that mistake again, and it's ultimately what ends up taking his life. And It's just a really great scene, and it's the first scene where you see something more of Mike, and Mike kind of became one of my favorite characters in the show, just really cool. And it's also kind of like a check for Walter, because I think beyond him kind of going up against a lot of these, like, dealers and Gus and all these people that he had in his life or in his circle, Mike became a character that he may butt heads with at times, but I think that moment, he became somebody he really respected as well because of what he's been through and that piece of advice that he gave Walt, that from that point on, Walt pretty much enacted or basically put into action even better than Mike did. Which is, that I think that's Walt's character too. He would take whatever somebody would give him and kind of almost make it better in some ways, and that's kind of how he bested Mike in that scene at the end of the what was that season?
Season 5.
The break in season 5. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's in that moment though. It's something that didn't need to happen at all. Mike didn't need to turn around and say, "And Walt, one more thing," kind of thing. And Walt didn't have to go into. I mean, that was such a pointless death in a way. Yeah. But you're right. And I remember you and I were talking about Mike's insistence on Walt arranging all that money for his guys. It's like you start off going, okay, this is the system, but after a while, it's like, well, Mike, no one really agreed to this, and wouldn't it be easier? I mean, again, in this world of these characters, isn't it easier? Isn't what we do that we just get rid of these guys? So in a weird way, Mike was kind of being old-fashioned about it, and not as ruthless as you would think. So yeah, what happened to Mike? Did he soften a little bit as he went along? I mean, did he think beyond a certain point maybe he could get out of this life and without any more bloodshed?
I don't think so. I think that it's the way he viewed Walt. Walt was soft to him. He was soft, but soft doesn't mean defenseless
or weak.
Yeah. That doesn't. These are two separate. I mean, on a one-on-one, Mike would destroy him, and he did. He did several times. Prove that he could.
But each one of those, don't you think that fueled Walt's rage? Right. His sense of when he finally did shoot Mike, it was out of just impotence almost. But
you should never. I think that what he confused with weakness was kind of him. I think that what made Walt so amazing was he was not afraid to seem weak at times. He was not afraid to kind of be, kind of in the corner, shaking his hand, and please, no, and then do something insane after that. Right. I think there was something pretty amazing about that sort of cowering and then coming out of that cowardice to do crazy things. He manipulated people a lot. Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things that Mike did. He kind of took this weakness for, like, I don't know.
Yeah, he misunderstood Walt.
He misunderstood what he was
He misunderestimated him. Is that what people say? No, I do think that also crucial to that is the fact that, like, Mike, he was wrong. What he said to Walt at the end about they had a good thing going. When Walt,
he was kind of right.
When Walt concocted, but what his whole thing was, we had a good thing going. You didn't have to kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. Talking about Gus, but let's not forget, Gus had taken Walt out into the desert and put a gun to his head and said, "I'm going to kill your whole family if you interfere with me."
He did.
So Walt was. Mike didn't. Mike knew, but it's almost like Mike. He was actually out there for that. So it's like Mike was willfully forgetting that he was fine under Gus's reign. But Walt wasn't. And I guess what I'm saying is I think it's interesting. It's kind of like with Jane, Steve, the way that she was not a perfect... You saw that she was kind of abrasive and she was kind of like not a great influence on Jesse. It didn't mean she deserved to die.
Sure.
Kind of the same thing with Mike. It doesn't mean we want to see him get killed, but you can see the weaknesses that make this character... Like, if Jane hadn't been so abrasive to Walt, he would have probably not... let her die in front of him. And I think the kind of the same thing, like with Mike, if Mike had been a little more understanding of the plight that Walt was in, and like you said, not always thinking Walt just doesn't understand, then maybe that they could have been allies. It was always clear, though, from the beginning of that, once Gus was gone, it was always clear that eventually Mike and Walt were going to have to go up against each other.
But that's assuming that. But I guess you're assuming that Mike's never been in that same position before with Gus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like maybe Mike has experienced something like that before where his family was threatened by Gus but it's like, don't upset it. It's okay as long as you work within it.
Right.
And that's not what Walt was willing to do, obviously. But Mike, in his mind, that could have been a scenario. That's something that he seems like a pretty smart character and a pretty smart person in the series. So I definitely agree with where you're going with that. I just think that when he makes that comment, I think he likes the like what to him is like normal.
Yeah.
And that was with how Gus did it.
Right. Well, I mean, again, maybe not wrong from his point of view, but we can see how he's not understanding the predicament Walt was in.
Sure, absolutely.
My third and final moment.
Yes.
Man, it's
because there's only 3 or 4 good moments on Breaking Bad.
Right. I call this the final bond. And it was the last scene of was it the last scene? The second to last scene of the show when Walt went into the building and then Jesse was brought into the room and then chaos ensues.
Chaos ensues.
Never, Ronald.
Cue it up.
Never has your catchphrase been more aptly applied.
So after it happens and the smoke clears, one person is still alive. Well, 2 people are still alive.
Yeah, you mean other than the 2 people that we hope are still alive?
Yeah. One of them is Todd.
Yeah.
And seeing Jesse finally get freed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a weird
like
point.
such a predictable moment, but such an satisfying to see that moment. Like you knew
you need that moment.
You knew when Todd was left alive after the barrage of bullets. You knew that he was left alive so that Jesse could kill him. But I mean, I'm saying that in a sense that I admire that the show managed to satisfy me so much with scenes where I literally had sort of pictured it happening almost exactly the way it happened.
Yeah.
I was like, hope Jesse gets to strangle Todd with a chain.
After it happened, I was like, Jesse has to kill. There's something super
and
nice.
Todd was not expecting that either. It's great.
Right. There's something super nice about the idea that Vince got to finish the show on his terms. And then it feels like Walt also got to finish everything the way he wanted to. Like, this was the best version of a worst case scenario that you can ever have in your life.
Because it's not like a happy ending, but it's definitely a satisfying one. And to see it go that way, and also the fact that Uncle Jack, we get to see in that moment that Walt isn't about the money at all at this point. Like when Jack says, "Don't you want to know where your money is?" and Walt doesn't even want to humor that conversation.
Right. Like, it's not about that. He took care of the situations that he had to take care of. And that was it. But
I think a key thing is as best he could under the circumstances. Yeah. So many people have said they thought that he kind of got off light, but I feel like before that, the last episode before that was all about taking Walt to the absolute bottom. Like when he's out in the cabin in New Hampshire and he's paying someone $10,000 to spend an hour with him.
Yeah.
There's nothing more lonely and sad than that. So I feel like what they did that was brilliant was everything after the shootout in the desert was all about seeing Walt lose everything we knew he was fighting for this whole time.
Yes.
And then seeing him taken down to the bone so that we could kind of root for him again, I think, in that last episode. Because that last episode was all about, well, what can he do now? Now that he's cornered, what can he do? And the fact that his plan was kind of simple, that it was kind of easy to predict maybe who the poison was for and who the gun was for, that didn't ruin the effectiveness of it for me at all. Yeah. I liked that it was happening. I liked that it felt like the right things were happening, They weren't thrown in a twist just to be just to fuck with you.
I don't think that it had to have been. He set the ending up for it to be an ending. Walt set his last couple hours up to be exactly what everything was taken from him. Mm-hmm. What the fuck was the point besides looking out for his family and then avenging?
Yeah. And when Skyler, when he says after tonight, you won't have to worry about this, and she's like, what happens tonight? I don't even remember what he says, but just when she says what happens tonight, Walt just has this look where I'm like, oh, he's doing something with that gun tonight. Like we see it, and at that point, I guess he'd already used the poison.
There's something really also very nice about the idea that, like, I think that Walt wanted Jesse dead up until the point where he saw him.
Yeah.
he saw him as a prisoner, and he's like, "What the fuck? This is not what I was expecting."
Well, and he changed his mind in that moment, and he decided to maybe sacrifice himself to kill Jesse. So do you think Walt's plan at first was to die when the gun went off? Do you think he wanted to gun himself down at that moment? Or do you think... Because I felt like the fact that he had to tackle Jesse to save him in that last scene was sort of also why he wasn't dead. You know what I mean? Because clearly Walt expected and wanted to die in that moment.
I think he just kind of wanted everybody to get sprayed up. But then you could see his face change when he saw Jesse. He was like, oh, yeah, this is not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
He thought that he thought Jesse was going to come out like, hey, bitch. I thought he thought that he was going to be like very strong and powerful and pointing down at him. And it wasn't that. He's being held captive. So
well, that's true, because he really did think they had kind of partnered with Jesse more than they had up to that moment. And that felt like a play, like he was trying to get Uncle Jack to be mad and bring Jesse in. But I don't know if Walt could have predicted all that. I think Walt just kind of wanted to figure out what was going on. And right. I don't know. Yeah. No, you're right. I think that I heard them say that they were basing a lot of that scene on The Searchers. There's a John Wayne, that's a really great Western, where all along they're going to rescue a girl that's been kidnapped by a Native American tribe. And all along they feel like, well, she's now been, God only knows what those savages have done to her, is kind of the implication of it. And the notion is that they're going to find her so that they can kill her, right. Take her out of her misery. And then when John Wayne finally finds her, he loves her too much. It's like it might be his daughter or his niece. I can't remember how they're related in the film. He decides to save her instead of to execute her, essentially, at the end. Wow. And they said that they were thinking of that moment when Walt... And so, yeah, what you said is dead on. That like, up till that moment, Walt was certainly not caring too much what happened to Jesse.
Right. That's crazy.
No, it definitely was his intention to kill him.
Yeah, he was going to kill the shit out of him. Like, you can tell, like, he's just like...
His goal, in the episode prior, when he saw the Gray Matters people on television, was they found two things out, that it was still in production, which says Jesse to him, and it was, a means to get the money to his family. Yeah. So, at the end, when he dies, when you're talking about this, it's like at the very end, the very beginning of the series, his sole purpose was to make money to leave his family before he died. Mm-hmm. And he absolutely, he did that. Like, that was the last thing he did, was that. You know what I mean? So in a way, he in his own means, he accomplished the one thing that put him into this whole world, which is pretty awesome. I don't know.
But without it, I mean, that was very, what he worked out with the Schwartzes. That was a clever twist to figure out, like, okay, these people kind of owe me one, and they're actually in a position to, maybe help my kid. And they could, I thought I wasn't expecting that. That scene where he shows up in their house was so tense because you just didn't know what Walt was going to do. But I was pretty sure, so many people were predicting all these crazy things, everybody dying, everybody gunning down. I just knew that all along Breaking Bad, it wasn't like, it was a dark show, but it was never a show that was designed just to make you sad. It was always about the kind of cleverness of the plot and how they could paint themselves into these narrative corners and then get out of them without breaking the rules of their world. Gotcha. I knew that it was going to end cleverly, not grimly. You know what I mean? So many people seem to think that it was going to, like, the kids were going to get blown up and Skylar was going to die and Walt was going to shoot himself. It was always going to be a little bit more about redemption, a tiny bit, a little drop of redemption at the end.
I agree.
Because we didn't hate Walt through and through. We did kind of... I mean, I do think the way we left him was very appropriate. But. Yeah. Well, my last pick is maybe the darkest moment that I can think of. Like, when things got as bleak as they got. It's in this episode from Season 4, the 11th episode of Season 4, called Crawl Space. It's a scene... We alluded to the beginning of this sequence earlier, which was when Walt's out in the desert and Gus has basically... Walt's leaving Jesse's apartment and he gets tased and a bag thrown over his head and he gets taken out to the desert, and that's when Gus Fring tells him, I will kill your infant daughter. He basically like tells him, if you interfere with,
great impression.
What he basically says is, we're gonna do something about your brother-in-law, and if you try to interfere, we're gonna kill your whole family. And so Walt, and it's interesting to me. I was rewatching that episode in preparation for this conversation, and it was interesting to see how long the thread has been. Walt, like, as things got more and more hot, him protecting Hank was a huge part of like what made life more difficult for Walt. Sure, he was always trying to avoid that. I mean, like they were family, they loved each other, and that there was something kind of, talk about another bond that got broken. That scene in the garage is all about, like, you can't go back from this moment. Yeah. But at that moment, he was trying to protect Hank, but he also knew that I can't let I can't let Gus kill my family, obviously. So he makes a mad dash to Saul's office, and Saul had referred to his guy who ran the vacuum cleaner shop before. We'd never seen him until the end of the 5th season. But Walt knows, I got your guy who disappears people. Hook me up with him. And Saul says, well, it's going to cost you, and if it's your whole family you're trying to disappear, I know this is like the deluxe package, it's going to be at least $500,000 to do 4 people. So, but Walt knows he's got the money in his crawl space at the house, so he runs back to the house. And then he discovers what we already know, which is that Skylar has given the money to pay off Ted Beneke, her ex-lover, who was, kind of shadily kind of blackmailing them. And we know that in the same episode, that has gone bust because Ted has tripped on some oranges, and that was the same episode where that all happened, what Ted's sad fate. But Skylar doesn't know that. She just knows she gave Ted the money to buy him off. Walt finds out that the money's not there, and his mind breaks. He's down in the crawl space of his house, and his mind breaks. Yeah. He screams, and then he laughs and he cries, and he's just laughing. And Skylar is looking at him. It's like something out of a horror film.
Yeah.
She's like saying, "Walt," like she can't. He's not human right now. He's howling in madness.
It's like a Shining moment.
And yeah, it very much is. And she backs up, and at that moment, Marie is calling because she's just gotten Walt has also told Saul to call into the DEA to warn Agent Schrader, Hank, that there's going to be a hit out on him. So Marie's calling Skylar to say, it's happening again. They're after Hank. And it's another brilliant sound design moment. The sound design, the score on that show was always real atmospheric, more so than melodic. And the music is getting intense. And then we go back to Walt laying there in the crawl space, and he doesn't know what to do now. As far as he's concerned, it's all over.
Yeah.
We're all going to die. And the camera just pulls out, and it goes impossibly high. It's just in the closet where the little trapdoor that leads to the crawl space is. It just pulls out and out and out and out while the audio is getting more distorted and stuff. It just feels like, as we've said before, there's so many. It was one of those episodes that ended where you go, I don't know where they pick up from here. And as in as they often did, they pretty much pick up right with, well, what do we do now? But in that moment, I remember watching that and just going if I didn't know that the show went on after that point, I would think, I guess he's just catatonic now. There's no answer. Because at that moment, he's really sure that, like you were saying, all that stuff he was fighting to protect, his family, namely, he thinks they're all going to die. And that's
a great moment.
It was another moment where I just thought this show was one of the best acted shows I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Great
moment.
Yeah.
Crawl space.
My last moment is, I think some people refer to it as the Walking Dead moment, which is episode 13 of season 4, titled Face Off. Pretty direct title for an episode, but you don't really know that till the last shot.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, this is the episode where Gus basically outsmarts probably his most formidable opponent in the whole series, in my opinion, and basically manages to wire a bomb to Hector. And when Gus goes to visit Hector and thinks he's outsmarted him once again, you hear that bell going off, and Hector nervously keeps ringing it because it's not detonating, and then it does, and you think, oh shit, that just happened. But then we get that shot of Gus walking out, all proper, clean, shaking himself off.
For a split second.
You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
How did he? You're like, did he know something?
Yeah.
But then the camera comes around, and you just see the reactions of the nurses in the hallway looking at him from the side that we don't see. Mm-hmm. And we're like, what are they looking at? And then it comes around, and you're like, oh, yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. He got him.
Done.
Yeah, and that was a really cool moment because... Just... I think that's probably where Walt was at his most brilliant, in terms of outsmarting.
Really, what you're talking about, that scene directly followed the crawl space moment. From that moment on, he's trying to take Gus out.
Yeah.
And he fails several. He has a tough time. But yeah, no, you're right, Steve. It was so rewarding to see him actually think his way out of that impossible situation.
Yeah, and it's just. Yeah, I don't know.
Because Gus is so careful.
Yeah.
This is the only thing.
He's so meticulous, almost to the point like Walt is, but almost a step further for the most part. Like you just said, the times that Walt has failed, you see where Gus had the up on him, or the one step ahead of him. But this is the moment where... He
discovered Gus's one weakness, which is his pettiness, his bitterness, his desire for revenge, his hatred for Hector Salamanca.
And I don't want to run on too much about it, but because it's pretty straightforward scene, because straight up, he just got your ass.
Yeah, but it's great that they played it as that moment where you thought, no, it didn't work. What's going to happen now? Oh, wait, it worked.
Well, and then what follows that, what you kind of find out after that, or also in that episode, you basically, you find out about him poisoning the kid in that episode, and the whole moment where he goes back to Skylar and he says, "I won." I mean, that is like a pure, that's Heisenberg. Like, that's the moment, or that's a moment, if not the moment, where Skylar, you can see her feel it, and Walt embraces it so obviously, and you're just like, damn, like,
her look
just happened.
Her look on the phone call where he says, "I won," is very similar to the look on the face when she's backing away from him when he's in the crawl space. It's just this look of like, ugh, this man,
Yeah.
No, that's fascinating. And at that moment, it's amazing that they give him this great victory, and then when revealing with you realizing what he did to poison Brock to bring all this about, it's like it's a little bit like the train heist. Like, you get this moment of victory where you want to pump your fist, and then you instantly have the kind of sickly reminder of like, who am I rooting for here?
Yeah.
But that was definitely, I mean, that was still I was in Walt. I wanted to see Walt think his way out of that mess, even though it's not like, I'm not like Team Walt or whatever, but I think that it was amazing that the show did that they actually...
And that's the balance, though. Like, the fact that we're rooting for that, and you want him to succeed, and he's like our anti-hero, but then immediately, like you just said, you found out he poisoned a kid.
Yeah.
Like, what the... Like, let me decide to side with you and be okay with that.
Yeah.
And then completely pull the rug out and be like, I can't do this. This is a bad relationship for me. I can't be your friend anymore. But then you still kind of hang around and want to know what's going on.
That's what defines the show, man. It's
dude, seriously.
Up and down.
Well, and also that
incredible.
line, "I won." The show was great at having these simple lines that became like thematically important. Like, "I'm the one who knocks."
Yeah.
"I won." What was the other one? "Tread lightly" this year. There's all these great lines.
Tread lightly was one of my
that
favorites.
are like,
Say my name.
Yeah, say my name.
line.
So you're damn right.
Yeah.
So simple, and also my favorite Jesse Pinkman line of all time. "These fake Pop-Tarts are the bomb, yo." But I think that, it was amazing how simple they could make those moments and how they could make that resonate. And of course, it was the acting and I mean, we haven't really talked about just the fact that it was one of the best photographed shows that's ever been on television. But it always looked so interesting, and it always had such an emphasis on plot. And I don't think there's many other shows that I love that have such an emphasis on what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's more about the characters, more about the various other trappings, but this is a show where really just seeing what are the writers going to think of was sort of the game.
Great show.
Yeah.
It will be missed.
Definitely.
It upsets me when I look at my queue and see that Breaking Bad, it's like continuing or next episode date.
Yeah.
And it just straight up says status ended. It's
Right.
like, oh no, it can't be.
Sad stuff, man.
Did you ever listen to the Breaking Bad podcast? They did like a weekly podcast where it would be like the writers and the creators of the show would get together, and sometimes with an actor, and they would talk about the episodes at length, like sometimes for an hour and a half.
Wow.
And so I always kind of enjoyed listening to that. Almost like after the episode would air, it would be on Monday that they would drop that podcast.
Oh, wow.
And it was almost like the episode ended, and I was like, well, I still have the podcast to listen to, And then the podcast was over, and it was like, there's no more, like, no more Breaking Bad. But I mean, so how do we think it stacks up in terms of how it ended against the great shows of all time? Do you think other shows may
It's no Dexter. Let's just be honest.
other shows may have had a final episode that was more kind of important to the show, but I don't think that, like, Breaking Bad, from a story standpoint, I can't think of another show that really wrapped up its run as gracefully.
Agreed.
The Wire, maybe.
Yeah, maybe The Wire.
Maybe The Wire, but
But at best, we'll say that the fifth season is divisive. Like, I enjoyed the fifth season of The Wire, but a lot of people didn't. But, like, Breaking Bad seems to be a show that everyone seems to agree that last chunk of episodes was just some of the best television
they just put the
ever.
pedal to the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, like, they just went all out, and that's what I want. And
That's
that's what
what I
everybody
needed.
wanted, You got everything you needed in most ways. Like, you're talking about Todd and Jesse getting Todd and letting Jesse have Todd. I mean, that's just what you want in a show like that, and something that you've invested 5 seasons as a viewer into. I can't think of a series that I have felt as fulfilled with when it ended. You know what I mean? Like, from beginning to us talking about these episodes right now, I want to go back and watch this whole series from beginning to end again.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, and just for the reason that I remember it so well, and just talking about these episodes and these scenes that we all loved. I mean, the fact that I could, we all had different scenes. I mean, some of them may have overlapped, but not many series have that many defining scenes, or lines or moments. And like you talk about the way the plot was driving this series from the beginning to the end, which is very rare in shows that are very successful or are watched by a lot of people. It's just the kind of thing that allows for so many great characters, allows for so many great moments, and allows for viewers to identify 10 people can pick 10 different scenes. And that's not very common. I feel like a lot of shows that are around now, there's probably 3 or 4 scenes that most people will always go to, because that's kind of like, that was the big moment of that season. Or that whatever. But Breaking Bad has had those moments peppered throughout every season.
And also, they would get to things quicker. Like when this last 8-episode chunk started up, that moment in the garage, we kind of alluded to it earlier. But when Walt almost leaves, like you could see them stretching out the cat and mouse game for a season. Walt almost leaves, but he's got that transmitter in his pocket, and he turns around. And he knows he's letting Hank know that he knows that he knows. And Hank knows however he responds now, he's letting Walt know that he knows that he knows.
Yeah.
But when Walt says, "What about this transmitter?" and then Hank hits the button on the garage door and it just closes down, and you're just like, "Oh, this is on!" Like this is the first episode. I thought this would be episode 8. They would get to this, but then when you see what they do at the end of that, it's like you really start to see this is all about the toll. Like that it's all about the family being destroyed. And again, whatever you thought of those characters, it was so tough seeing those people that used to love each other and used to share a table and all these laughs. These people who, it's over.
Yeah, it's done.
And it made you feel like, man, the show's over. This is,
Yeah. I thought it was great. Loved it.
Yeah.
Same.
I can't wait to watch it again. It's an understatement, like how much I'll miss a show like this.
Yeah.
We all watch a lot of TV, and I know I watch a ton of TV.
Yeah.
And I don't know many shows that I like really genuinely love and look forward to every episode as much as I did with Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe in the show's run, I did, but consistently, I don't know if I can pick another one.
Right.
Honestly.
In the past couple of years, I agree, man.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Nothing compares to it within the past couple of years. So.
Breaking Bad. Seek it out if you're listening to this and like we just ruined everything.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I mean, if you
watch
did
the show.
listen this far, I guess you're a very strange person. I can't imagine why anyone would be unsure about
watch
that.
it again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it's likely there's probably not going to be something as good on TV this season as there was then,
Right.
or with these 5.
Yeah, even spoiled, Breaking Bad is better than most things on television. And that's actually, most often, I hate when people say that. Oh, a bad episode of this show is better than most what's on television.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, it's not true. If it's bad, it's bad. But really with Breaking Bad, there weren't that many bad episodes. I mean, it took maybe a few episodes to find its tone. But really I know some people say the first season is kind of slow, but I felt like the first season still had some of my favorite stuff in it.
Yeah.
It's just
very good.
It had not found that place yet where the world of characters had to kind of get developed, but it never really dropped the ball.
Yeah.
So
man, greatest show of ever.
I don't know that I can ever say that.
It is
but
one of
definitely
the best
one of
shows
them.
I've ever
One of
seen
them
in my
for sure.
life.
I mean, you
I
got The
think
Wire, you've got Deadwood, you've got The Sopranos.
Oh, fucking Deadwood. I could talk about that for hours, but yeah.
But unlike Deadwood, this is a show that got to finish.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. So many of these shows, like, they don't have an ending in mind. And it is amazing that they would start off a season, like, for instance, when they wrote that scene where he buys the machine gun or he went and got the poison, they said they didn't know when they wrote those scenes who the gun was for.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who the poison was for. So it's
I've
like,
read a couple of those interviews.
it's amazing that they were able to keep the consistency that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Without a plan from the beginning, which to me just says that is a room full of really, really smart television writers who knew what they were doing and probably were allowed maybe to really be creative and push the limits of how deep a story could go into this one plot and just watching it get tighter and tighter. So
I'd recommend checking out the episode of The Writer's Room with
that's a really
the
good
Breaking Bad
episode.
cast,
Yeah.
or the writers and cast. Definitely a must see.
I would also recommend checking out those Breaking Bad podcasts and stay away from Talking Bad or whatever the name of that
You
is.
don't like Talking
Horrible.
Bad?
I hated it.
I don't know. We'll talk. We'll talk for at another time about like Chris Hardwick and that whole empire of like
Shittiness.
official nerds or something like
it feels
that.
like a fan club when
Yeah.
watching those episodes, which is weird to me.
Well, it was always a weird panel. I mean, I saw a couple of people that were kind of amusing on there, but
Sam Jackson was probably one of the worst that I've seen. He didn't really have much to contribute, man. Anyway, it's kind of weird to me. He wasn't that good.
well, he's off in actor jail now, I think, isn't he? Or no, wait, he got to stay.
He almost-
State of execution.
Yeah. All right, guys. So maybe get together next week and talk about some movies again.
We'll go back to movies.
We've had this brief sojourn with the screens that are at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see if there's anything that can satisfy us as much as Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Unlikely, but
Probably not.
probably not. This is the season, though. If there ever was going to be a movie, it'll come out now.
Right.
So that's in our favor, Ronald.
Yep.
Silver lining, buddy.
In fact, I think we've already seen a movie that would hit
Oh.
that
okay.
category. And Ronald, you need to go see
I don't want to talk
Prisoners.
about it though.
I
We'll
need
talk
to.
next time about that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. iTunes, subscribe, star it, rate it, whatever you want to do to it. Just make sure it's owned by you in some way.
Please.
Rub it, flip it, wrap it down. Oh no, what was the Belle Biv DeVoe lyric? Am I the only one that remembers that?
Poison?
Yeah.
Yep.
That girl is poison, Ronald.
Yep. Slap it, flip it, rub it down.
Oh no.
Why would you do it in that order anyway?
Right.
That's further discussion.
Yeah, after you've flipped it, it's kind of hard to rub it down.
Yeah. It's already flipped.
All right, guys.
And on that
the episode, as always, you've made our day.
No, as usual, you've made us gay.
Good thing there was a pause there, Ron. There's enough of a pause there, John, that you can cut that.
We had already kind of taken it into the ditch a little bit. All right. Well, Ronald, I think you've got to get out of here. You got to go see a movie.
I do.
Steve and I have to now talk until there's a more suitable ending point. Just say bye-bye, Ronald.
Walter, remember when the world was young and all the girls knew Walter's name? Walter, isn't it a shame the way our little world has changed? Do you remember Walter playing cricket in the thunder and the rain? Do you remember Walter smoking cigarettes behind your garden gate? Yes, Walter was my mate, but Walter, my old